Hello, everybody.
Hello, Professor Davis.
Hello. There you go. I'm Steve Davis. I'm chair of the Newspaper and Online Journalism Department. So I want to thank you for coming. This is the first day of our Race in the Media Symposium. We're going to kick it off tonight with Maria Hinojosa, and Dean Lorraine Branham will introduce her in just a second. A couple things I want to mention. You've been watching some of the social media videos that were created in the race, gender, and media classes taught by Ann Osborne and Brad Gorham. They'll play around the school again tomorrow as well. There are a couple of people I did want to thank in particular, besides Brad Gorham and Ann, Jim Shaheen and Karen Henderson in particular also did a lot of hard work on this. And Christy McClurg, who you may see tomorrow, she did everything else. So you should congratulate Christy for doing that. Associate Dean Joel Kaplan is going to do the Q&A with Maria. She's going to have a few remarks that she'd like to make. First, I think this is a really timely event, and I don't have to explain why. I think sometimes, as we were discussing at dinner, it's a little confusing. It's a little maddening. We were talking at dinner that it's very complex, but I also think it's an opportunity. And as tomorrow's communicators, I hope you see it that way. And when I say tomorrow, I mean tomorrow, because it's almost graduation time or internship time. So you're all going to be out there in this complex world. Besides Maria, our guests for tomorrow are also here. Michael Fletcher of The Undefeated, Jesse Holland of the AP, Michelle Marsh, ABC, and Teron Moore from Teen Vogue. As I'm going to mention tomorrow, this is a time when we really need role models, and we have a bunch of them here for the next 2 days, and we are really lucky. So, Lorraine, let me stop this, and it's all yours.
Let it keep going.
Let it keep going?
Yeah.
No, I'll start it again. Everybody wants to listen.
Yeah, right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. So nice to see a full house today. I hope you're getting extra credit for this. No, just joking. I hope you're here because you really want to be here and hear what our very special guests have to say. I am Lorraine Branham, the dean of the wonderful Newhouse School, and it is wonderful to be able to be here with you all today to talk about issues that are very important to us about the role of women and people of color in the business and how the media portrays women and people of color in our everyday coverage of them. And at an earlier dinner, we had a conversation about using that term, the media, because it is such a broad term. It encompasses so many areas that have nothing to do with news. So tonight we're going to start saying the news media, to clarify a little bit about what we're talking about and not the big general, the media. I am so pleased that we have a very special guest here tonight to kick off this 2-day symposium. Maria Hinojosa, who I hope many of you know, and I hope many of you have had an opportunity to see her work, is back visiting us again. She was actually here a few years ago, and so it's great to be able to have her here in the Herg again. She was here in the Herg once before and also at Hendricks Chapel, talking about issues near and dear to her heart and to many of ours as well. The last time we had her here, we were talking about immigration, and it was really at a time when the whole issue of immigration was hot and heavy. It is an issue that she's very passionate about. We're going to talk maybe a little bit about some of that today, but mostly we're going to talk about how people of color are portrayed by the news media and the challenges that journalists face in covering some of those stories. If you don't know Maria, she is an award-winning news anchor and reporter who covers America's untold stories, and she highlights today's critical issues. She's the anchor and executive producer of the Peabody Award-winning show Latino USA, which is distributed by NPR. And she's also the anchor and executive producer of the PBS show America by the Numbers with Maria Hinojosa. And she has informed millions about the changing cultural and political landscape in the U.S. and abroad. And certainly there's a lot to talk about when you talk about the political landscape and how things have changed, even in a very short period of time. In April 2010, she created the Futuro Media Group, an independent nonprofit organization that produces multimedia journalism that explores and gives critical voice to the diversity of the American experience, and which is also committed to telling stories that are often overlooked by mainstream media. And that is, I think, what we're going to be talking about over the next 2 days, because a lot of this is about those stories that are overlooked by the mainstream media, those issues that affect communities of color that you often don't get to hear about, those positive stories about people of color that the media often don't tell. So without further ado, because I don't want to cut into the time that we have with her, because she has a flight to catch, and we thank her for making time for us. Joel Kaplan, thanks for doing the honors. Maria, thank you again for coming. We are so happy to have you with us tonight. Maria Hinojosa.
Just one more bit of ado. Journalism Matters is a hashtag we're using tonight, and also Race and Media SU. That's AND, Race and Media SU, and Journalism Matters.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and sit down. And please tweet as per the dean. That podium is not necessarily friendly to chaparras. Chaparras is an endearing term for how we call short women in Mexican Spanish. I am short, actually. I'm only 5 feet tall. So oftentimes what happens is people will be like, oh my God, it's so nice to meet you. And then they'll be like, what? I can just see it in their face. They're like, ugh. And I'm like, you thought I was taller. They're like, yeah. If it's okay with you, and because there are so many journalists in the room, and we're going to open it up to questions, right? So yep. I'm going to end up having a lot to say anyway. So I'll try to keep this somewhat brief, but it's just some opening remarks. We are in a very strange time. Actually, over dinner, I called it one of the most horrible, beautiful times that we're experiencing as American journalists. And to be honest with you, and thank you to Newhouse for having me back. I know I feel like I've been back to Syracuse a couple of times in the past several years, and I really do, it's a very special place for me. Plus, my niece lives somewhere near here. I think Hamilton. That's near here, right? Yep. Hamilton. Like at a competitive school, I think it's Colgate, so that has nothing to do with here. Anyway, so there were many things that I did imagine, actually, and there were many things that I didn't imagine that could happen over the last span of, let's say, a year. I in fact, did believe in August of 2015 when I was on Meet the Press, I did in fact say that I believed that Donald Trump could be the nominee. I think I was kind of looked at strangely for believing that might happen. And frankly, ever since I spent time as a journalist reporting for PBS on our television special, The New Deciders, and I was in Ohio in July, I actually believed that Donald Trump could win the election. I was with white folks who lived 5 minutes from Ohio's largest mosque. They had neighbors who were Muslim and their friends. And we were meeting on Sunday at a diner right outside of Cleveland. And these were really sweet people. In fact, some of them said things that were a little strange, like, I'm going to throw up in my mouth when I go vote for Donald Trump, but I'm going to vote for him. And I was like, why would you do that? But because that was really gross. Nobody actually has ever said that to me. But then they said that they were going to vote for Donald Trump, even though they really disliked him. And I would say things like, well, so you have the largest mosque in Ohio right down the street from where you are. Oh, yes. And I said, do you have Muslim neighbors? Yes, yes, they're such nice people. Yes. But you know what Donald Trump has said in terms of then the Muslim ban. And they were like, yeah, that will never happen here. He doesn't really mean that. And that would never really impact my neighbors. And I thought, Donald Trump has a really good chance of winning. So I did, in fact, imagine that we could be right where we are today. The strange thing, and something that I didn't imagine, was as journalists and frankly as human beings, I think we're accustomed to moving forward, to progression, right? Even if it's slow, there's a sense of moving forward. For those of us who cover immigration, for example, and race relations, it really does feel like we're going backwards. And that is strange for us because I don't really have a template right now that understands how to cover when we're regressing. But the truth is that in terms of immigration, which is something that I cover a lot of, the fear, the deportations, the raids. I think when I was here last, I probably said the same thing that I'm saying right now. So what I said then and what I've said whenever I'm traveling across the country, because I've been to all 50 states, so I'll say things like, probably 5 or 10 minutes from where we are right now, there is somebody who is living in fear, who is an undocumented immigrant. I've been saying that for about 10 years. So the fear, the deportation, the raids, they have been here for quite a while. Let's not forget that President Barack Obama is the president who has deported more people in the history of the United States, upwards of 2.5 million people. So what is weird, and this is progress, is that there is a horrific, cloudy, rainy, thunderous silver lining that we're living through, which is that probably many of you are more aware now about terms like deportations and ICE and raids and know your rights sessions that are being held. So it is strange to think that it is because of this administration actually that a light has been shown on something that many of us have been talking about and saying this is important for many years now. So it is a weird, horrific, thunder-filled silver lining in this cloud. Probably many of you didn't know about the fact that in terms of being immigrants and how we deal with our intersection with the, it's not the criminal justice system because it's not criminal, it's civil. But we are, in fact, the only difference between me and you, some of you, and why I might intersect with ICE and you might not is because I was born outside of this country. I'm a citizen, so it was going to take a lot to mess with me, but they can still do that, I imagine. But the strange thing is that what we are witnessing in real time is what it is like to have a sector of people who live in this country who are essentially like canaries in the mine in terms of how much due process they can be denied. And the notion of denying due process to anyone living in our country and the thought that it will not eventually come to you, there is a slippery slope. So what am I talking about, denial of due process? Well, in this country, it is unlawful to impersonate a law enforcement officer. You are supposed to know who is the law enforcement that you are engaging with. That's why they wear their names and their badges, etc. So when immigration officials, like right now, probably right here in Syracuse at the ICE station near here. And they're making plans for the 5 o'clock raid tomorrow morning at a person's house in your communities. More than likely, and we've actually seen it in video that you've seen, their immigration and customs enforcement agents, what do you see them wearing? What does it say on the clothing that they're wearing, though? Somebody?
Nothing.
Thank you. Who said police? Police. So that's a problem. They're not police. So, no, they are not police. They are immigration customs enforcement agents. So it makes you feel a little uncomfortable, right? Good. Imagine that you are then picked up and you are not told why you are being detained. You know, all of you watch Law and Order, right? Because that's been around so long that everybody, you all have heard the Miranda, people being Mirandized all the time. That doesn't happen when you're engaged with ICE. It's another violation of basic due process. Do you think you get a phone call? Good luck to you. So I could go on and on and on, but I'm telling you that right now, at least maybe now you're aware of this. But here's what I didn't expect, you guys, and this is the beauty of everything, and the fact that you're here and that you're at Newhouse and that I'm here with you tonight, is that I did not expect the total, absolute love for journalists that there is now in our country. I call these people my news angels wherever I am, where I'm like at the gym, at the Zumba class, or I'm running in Central Park, I'm running through the airport, I'm getting a cup of coffee, and people are stopping me and they're saying, thank you. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for the work that you do. And I'm sure for my professional colleagues, it's happening to them as well. And so, yeah, Spotlight won Best Picture of the Year. Yeah, it had to do with hard news. And yeah, that's what all of us are doubling down on, right? Is being the best possible journalists that we can be. Good thing is that we're actually, it's connecting, right? So even in my small nonprofit media company, and we can talk about that and why I decided to create that, but even in my small nonprofit where we launched our own political podcast basically because for some reason Meet the Press stopped asking me to be on. I don't know why. I would love to. It was great. Love to be asked back. But then I was like, oh. So I created our own Meet the Press, but basically from the perspective of people of color, POC. And that's taken off. It's, you know, featured on the front page of iTunes. We're beating Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly and Anderson Cooper and Meet the Press podcast. So you should pull out your phones and subscribe. I give you permission. Latino USA, we just got our audience numbers from last year. Our audience numbers on the radio grew by 45%. Hello. 45%. Thank you. And yet, you know, I feel like my students, because yeah, I teach at DePaul in Chicago. I'm flying out tomorrow morning, not tonight. You know, it's like my student whose mom is undocumented. He's a brilliant student who just got accepted into a master's program in Seattle, and he's like, you want me to go do my master's program when I'm worried every day if my mom is going to get picked up and deported? You want me to go to Seattle and get my master's when I'm worried every day? And I'm like, yeah, I do. I want you to go get your master's. But it is the same unsettling feeling, right? Because we know that there is love for what we're doing, and yet the truth is that in the wake of what's happening in our country right now, the destruction of families, of people's mental health, of young people, of children feeling fear in our country, it is horrific. It is, and I'm not going to start crying because I'm not going to do that, but I could, and I don't have a problem with crying, by the way. But here's the weird thing, and then I'll open it up. So I have never been in a situation where I am 5 things that the president, this president, has said that he really has a problem with. I'm Mexican. I'm an immigrant. I'm a journalist, I'm a woman, and I'm flat-chested. So it is a challenge. And I don't know if I'll ever go to one of the White House press briefings, maybe, maybe not. But I know what kind of journalism I have to do. And I know that we do it with my team in New York. Please come visit us, apply for an internship. We do it with so much love for the work that we do and for the stories that we have to tell. And I believe that that's a crucial reason why our numbers are so strong, is because we love what we do. And we love doing it for everyone. And so, yeah, I'm angry, but I'm also being motivated by tremendous amount of love for my profession and for the people who are consuming the work that we do. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Maria. Welcome to the Newhouse School.
Thank you.
I'm kind of surprised that you said how great it is right now to be a journalist because everyone is thanking you for what you do. Obviously, you haven't been to any Trump rallies lately.
No, I haven't been, and I didn't go to Trump rallies, but I spent a lot of time with Trump, and I'm spending increasing amounts of time with Trump supporters, mostly Latinos who are Trump supporters. And the ones that I'm spending time with, this is, I mean, I know it's weird, but the Trump supporters, some who are working in the administration, some who are surrogates, they're actual fans of the work that we do.
Well, but his supporters are not, and I've talked to a lot of journalists who've gone to some rallies and other things, and there's been a history of anti-media going back a long, long time, but there are journalists who are somewhat fearful for their lives and their safety because of the animus that's directed their way at the urging of the President of the United States. Doesn't that concern you?
It concerns me greatly. And that is a part of the story, absolutely. There is also, I don't know, because for me, what happens, Joel, is that I'm actively engaging at all times. So, and again, I did not go to Trump rallies. I was at the RNC and the DNC, but I was not at the Trump rallies.
Did you specifically choose not to do that? Or why not, I guess I would ask you?
Because we have a small nonprofit media company, and we were not charged with covering the election per se. We did, so actually, I mean, if we had had the money to be traveling around the country, we might have been doing that. So no, what we were doing is we were actually interviewing journalists who were on in the thick in our political podcasts, the journalists who were out on the trail, most of whom were all POC journalists, were coming and telling us, and they were, although it was, not all of them. Some of our journalists of color who were at Trump rallies didn't have that experience, whereas others, of course, and we all saw it, were the horrific things that were said, or the signs that were left in the press pens. So I'm not belittling that. I'm only telling you that right now, and again, I'm not in the Washington press corps, right? It's very different. I can tell you what I'm feeling, and that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling people who are saying that and stopping me in ways that hadn't happened before. Now, if I go on Twitter, it's interesting. I'm even though I'm somewhat active, I don't get a whole lot of hate. Maybe if I'm saying that, that's going to change. I do in certain moments, and the things, I've learned how to block people on Twitter. I'm so happy. So when there's a line that's crossed, I'll block people. But other than that, I actually get made fun of because sometimes I'll engage with trolls, and I'm like, no, that's a real person.
Yeah. It's a real troll, at least.
Yeah, a real troll. I mean, again, that's more of my nature.
So you were somewhat prescient in that you actually said that Trump might win, but you were in a rare minority in that case. And I think during the election, most of the media would listen to what he said about Mexican being rapists, building the wall, and just kind of, yeah, he's not going to get elected, so it doesn't really matter. But then he got elected. So my question to you is, what's wrong right now with the coverage of the immigration situation?
Woo! Wow. I mean, where to start? I guess one of the things, depending on if I'm turning on cable television, it'll be a morning show and they'll be talking about immigration and no immigrants at all. And that just happens so often. So I just find that fascinating that there are not immigrants in every single conference. There are so many immigrant journalists or children of immigrants or who are working as journalists that it's just, I don't understand that. I think that there's, frankly, right now, we worry because sometimes there's a focus on immigration and then there's not. You know, something will happen and the focus will turn away. But again, you know, people are still getting picked up every single day. I mean, 35,000 beds are filled every night in immigrant detention centers across the country. Those are numbers that were mandated by Congress. So people have been getting deported over this entire period of time. So it's still there. And again, part of the good side about it is that we're at least talking about it.
So my question is it a lack of coverage or is it faulty coverage?
It's both. It's both. It's a lack of coverage. You know, I worked at CNN from 1997 to 2005. And I'm not sure that you're all very young, but you remember what CNN was doing post 9/11. A certain anchor, what would be his name?
Post 9/11?
Yes, who was on every night on CNN talking about broken borders. Please, somebody tell me. Every single night on CNN for
Lou
years.
Dobbs?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Lou Dobbs.
Yep.
That was not under the
You're
Trump
not supposed to ask me
administration.
questions. by the
Oh,
way,
sorry.
just-
Yeah, so that was coverage every night, but it was coverage that was out of context, right? So it's faulty, it's not enough, it goes away, so it's problematic. And I think now, you know, I mean, I just never thought that this many years into my career that it would be like I'm still having to go back to the very first story that I ever did when I was an intern at NPR in the year 1985, which was regarding protests around the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, which was the largest mass immigration reform that legalized about 3 million people. And here I am, and I'm having to go back? So frankly, as a journalist, it's exhausting, it's tiring. I understand that people are like, God, how much more can you talk about this? And frankly, in newsrooms, many of where you'll end up working, you'll hear that, which is like, oh, another immigration story? Oh, please, like seriously? So we have a problem because what's happening in these communities hasn't changed. What we do know is that the majority of children of immigrants or immigrants or children of immigrants rather, 90% are born in the United States. So these are children who are they are as American as you and me, because I became a citizen now, they're not going anywhere. Oh my God, what is it going to be when, you know, they're 6 years old now, all they're hearing about in their communities is fear of police, don't open the door if they show up. You may be taken away. We have to have power of attorney, mom and dad. And they're American citizens, and they're going to be growing up with a perception of absolute fear towards any kind of law enforcement. Wow, that's beautiful. That's going to be great.
So let me take it back in your
Obviously,
life.
I'm being facetious.
Let me take you back in your life a little bit. So you and I both grew up in Chicago. You grew up in the South Side, not too far from President Obama's home right now, right? I grew up in the North Side. I ended up going to work at Chicago Tribune, my dream job. But I saw you were quoted as that you were saying that when you were growing up, you never saw your story being told or portrayed. Why was that?
I don't know. I mean, I grew up in Chicago. We read the Chicago Tribune. We watched the evening news. My dad watched Meet the Press every Sunday. We had Time magazine. We were a Mexican family that understood the importance of consuming American journalism. But we weren't there. No, there were never any stories, right? Which is why I grew up never in my wildest dreams did I think I could be a journalist. Are you kidding? Never. So why? I mean, I would probably say we needed more diversity in the ranks of the Chicago Tribune and our local stations there to kind of be aware of the fact that even then, Mexicans in the city of Chicago were one of the fastest growing demographic groups, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. I mean, because when I first got there, well, before I got there, though, there was an all-white newsroom, almost an all-male newsroom, right? But when I got there in the late 80s and the 90s, there was a concerted effort, I think, to diversify the newsroom. Both the Tribune and the Sun.
The Tribune actually was kind of on the front lines of that, actually.
But then but you still felt as though your stories weren't being told, even after they did that. So why was that?
Well, sweetie, when I go to my class tomorrow, term of endearment, I know I've used it with everybody. When I go to class tomorrow in Chicago, I'm going to ask my students, do you feel visible?
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that overwhelmingly, 95% of my students who are first gen, mostly Latino, are going to raise their hands and say, no, we feel invisible. We don't feel like we're being seen and heard. And I'm like, wow, and you guys have got Jane the Virgin, and you've got Ugly Betty, and you've got me, and you've got, you know, Tom Llamas on ABC, and Llamas, et cetera, et cetera. So still, that is a part of the invisibility legacy that we still have to deal with. The good news for all of you at Newhouse, and particularly those of you who are Latino in this particular case, or Latina specifically, you know, as one of the fastest growing demographics, there's like crazy opportunity, right? Crazy opportunity. Sometimes that may mean that you have to take that opportunity into your own hands, which is what I did when I created my own nonprofit media company. But there is a business imperative for the kinds of reporting that you're going to be able to do. And that's going to be good not just for you, but for all of us. So I have been to all 50 states. And I love my country, my adopted United States of America, and I would say that overwhelmingly, I've been everywhere, you know, from, you know, the former Aryan Nations compound in northern Idaho, you know, to Guam, you know, our precious Guam. And most overwhelmingly, people are pretty open. And I still say that that I believe that it is a small group of our country that actually are buying into the more divisive, outwardly divisive things that this president has said. Still, I think that that's kind of how I'm operating. Of course, my guests on In the Thick will say yes, but they were able to vote for a president and look beyond the things that he had said about fill in the blank. So both things are happening at the same time for me as well.
So specifically, what do you think the media has to do in 2017 to make sure these voices that you're talking about are heard and that these students that you're talking about feel visible?
Well, that's huge. I mean, that's like, ugh. I mean, so, well, one, I've been talking about diversity in the media forever, since forever. I mean, I was the first Latina ever hired in the editorial offices of NPR, and that was 1985. So, and they've done better, but they're still not doing great, and that's, you know, NPR that distributes Latino USA. So the diversity in the media dynamic, as we know, again, I don't want to burst the bubble, and I haven't looked at the most recent statistics. So I'm saying both things, and I'm sure you're a little bit confused, because I do want you to feel like there is extraordinary opportunity. The truth is that diversity in the media has decreased over the last several years. Again, I haven't seen the most recent. So it's complicated. So what does the media need to do? It needs to hire more people of diverse backgrounds, and you need to be in those newsrooms saying, you know, oh my God, I just came upon this great story. And it happened because of who I am and where I go, and the reason that I decided to choose the stories that I like is because of who I am and where I go. And so we need to have more of that, and frankly, those of you, please study to become managers. It's not, I mean, being a journalist is a wonderful thing. We also need people who know how to manage in the world of the news business. And it doesn't always happen. You know, what happens is that journalists just get promoted to become managers, and they're like, I'm a journalist, I don't know how to manage. So we need diversity at all ranks, right? Certainly in the senior levels. I mean, in my case, we just created it. You know, we saw a void and we created it. And in the case of In the Thick, you know, there's a response. And I'm kind of like, wow, how is it happening that this little teeny podcast that we just kind of launched ourselves, we don't have a big distribution platform, is taking off? And I think because we are recognizing that there is a void, that part of what's happening, the major conversation in our country is demographic change. And our questions around race and ethnicity and identity and power and immigration. And so we created it ourselves. So that's another way, is to own your own voice. I mean, you're wicked smart. You're obviously here because of that. So that's a possibility, is to take your experiences as young Americans and young journalists and make it real. I mean, I don't know if that's enough of a list. I would actually love to hear what you guys think needs to happen.
Well, we're going to give them an opportunity in 1 minute. I just want to ask you one question, because you have been outspoken on some of these issues, and you have been outspoken on the immigration. And I don't know if you saw the story, but Christian Broadcasting Network recently criticized you. They said that, and I'm sure you Google your name, so you probably get this right. All right. This is what they say. They said that you wear your alien advocacy on your sleeve in the same uncritical way that Jorge Ramos of Univision does.
When was that? When did that come out?
I think it was, you know, when I Google, I should have the date, but I think it was in the last month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I wonder, so I actually was going to talk about something that happened, and I wonder if it was in, because what happened was I went on MSNBC, and actually it was the last minute when they told me, hey, by the way, you're going to have this former Republican congressman on with you. And I was like, okay. And I was on with Rosie Perez, the actress, and all of a sudden, it would have been fine, but frankly, the former Republican congressman used some words that were, I don't know, I guess I will say, no, I won't. But they were words that I just was not expecting. So for example, he was like, you need to calm down and stop being so hysterical about what's happening with immigration issues. And yeah, no, that didn't go over so well. So it was actually not my finest moment. It was not my finest moment because I am very honest about being emotionally connected to the stories that I do and to the people that I cover. And I'm emotionally connected to them, whether they're white supremacists or whether they're, you know, undocumented immigrants. So, and if you know the body of my work, that's actually what I do. So, yeah, so I kind of, it was, and actually I'm not interested in being people's clickbait either. That was also a really interesting thing, is a notion of like, oh, you know, let's just put Hinojosa there because she plays the angry Latina in a really good way. So I'm not interested in doing that. So I just don't want to be boxed in. And that may be part of what happened. But the truth is that Jorge Ramos has an audience that is a powerful audience, that is a powerful market force in this country. And Jorge Ramos is an American journalist, and I'm an American journalist. And Walter Cronkite, who I worked for and wrote for, is an American journalist. And so we all have a responsibility to tell these stories. I shudder when people say I'm an advocate, because I'm not. I don't believe I'm an advocate for anything except for great journalism and the American Constitution and our democracy and giving people voice. You know, if you're going to call me an immigrant activist, it's like, well, I'm an immigrant. I chose to become an American citizen. And the reason why I take these issues so to heart is actually not because I was born in Mexico. It's because I chose to raise my right hand and swear to this country that I would take up arms to defend it. That's why I do what I do.
So I have like a ton more questions, but they all have better questions than I do. So we're going to let them ask some of them, okay? Look at all those hands go up.
Somebody wait.
Professor Davis has bad knees, so be careful there.
This is good. I need. Better be a good question. I'll go.
Thank you for being here. My question is to your point about how now journalism is facing like a really weird time. I noticed a really particular challenge that journalists are facing, which is struggling between being neutral and truthful. So I just wanted to get your take on if you think one has to be sacrificed to get the other.
We have to be truthful. And for some people, that will mean that somehow we're now not neutral. But I think we have to be truthful. This is why this is such a challenge. And so, yes, I was trying to give you the love for our field and for, potentially you as journalists. But it is also a very scary time when we're now having to debate about truth and its role in what we do. And whether or not, if you're truthful, that somehow compromises you being neutral. Look, this is why I told you what I said about it is a challenge for me to approach this administration as neutral when I'm 5 things that this president overtly dislikes. So that means I have to do my best job as a journalist what I do as a journalist is I'm out there reporting. I'm talking to people, I'm hearing, I'm listening. I'm not saying, oh, I'm not going to talk to Joel because he's got an orange tie on. I don't talk to people with orange ties. I talk to everyone, and that's what I do. So, so the fact that that is somehow now would be considered to be, well, she's not neutral because she's talking to everybody across the country. It doesn't ring true to me. It is a particular challenge when we, as journalists of color, are dealing with an administration where we have to be very honest, and this is very difficult. We know right now from what we believe to be the facts that we understand them as far as Steve Bannon's history, is that we have potentially in the White House and to the closest ally of the president and his counsel, Steve Bannon. A potential possible one-time sympathizer of white nationalism or white supremacy. How do we as journalists of color approach a White House when that is part of the dynamic? I don't have the answer. I'm not in that press room. But I think that if we don't address that, there's a problem. And it is an issue. So if that makes me not neutral, it's based on fact, right? These are things that Steve Bannon has said. That has not, as far as I know, Steve Bannon has not, nor the president, come out and said something unequivocal about his position on those, or his positions over time. As a Mexican woman, journalist, American citizen, yeah, it's a challenge. I'm not covering the White House, right? I'm covering this. And this is the reporting that is going to inform the work that we do. So like I said, maybe I'll go to a White House briefing, maybe not. But from my vantage point, this is the best that I can do, which is to talk to everyone. By the way, so I also went viral on MSNBC. This was, some of you may have known in my little moment with illegal is not a noun, that then Fusion did a take on, and last count it was like 9 million people who had seen it. And it was a moment where I was confronting Steve Cortez, who is a Trump surrogate. And, Steve and I have become friends since then. We've gone out to lunch. He's come to my class at DePaul. He's coming to my class next quarter. So that's me. That's how I do my work. I do the reporting, and I'm meeting people across the political spectrum. That's what I do.
Hello, Maria. My name is Josue Munoz. I am a television radio film junior from West Chicago, Illinois. I'm an hour outside of the city. I thought I wanted to go into film, but you've opened my eyes to a whole new way of telling stories, and thank you. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Following that, I wanted to ask, as a mother, if you could have changed one thing about the media landscape that your daughter grew up in, what would it be?
Whoa. Okay, well, the first thing that I thought of is, not that this is the exact perfect best answer, but the first thing that I thought of, because she and I have talked about it, is, when I was growing up a million years ago, I got 17 magazine, speaking of Teen Vogue, I got 17 magazine once a month. And that would be when I would look at it and be just like, wow, this is so cool, I wish I could do that. Yeah, I don't look like any of these people at all. And then I'd just be like, okay, well, next, and deal with my own body and ethnicity and identities and not being represented in, women's magazines. My daughter, she wakes up, and by the time she goes to sleep, she's seen thousands of images of women who don't look like her. And so, how do you change that? I mean, that's like a denial of something. I'm not going to say, well, don't publish photographs, but it is a conversation that she and I have. But there are many other things, of course, that I might change. The cool thing, though, is that then there's places like Teen Vogue, right, that just give me so much hope, frankly, or Glamour, because I'm reading Glamour and Teen Vogue all the time. But I get a lot of hope from the coverage that I see, and I think that there are at least more conversations in this kind of coverage about body issues. So it's not perfect, but at least they're talking about it, whereas when I was growing up, there was just not even an awareness of it.
Gracias.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Maria, for being here. My question is related to your company in general, like Futuro Media Group. When I saw your TED Talk, you clearly said, like, once I see that in the newsrooms or in the editorial room, I force myself to raise my hand because my stories were not covered. I decided to create this company you created, Futuro Media Group, exactly to represent the voices that have not yet been represented. You have 3 different types of media, like Latino USA, which mostly concentrates in Hispanic community. Then you have ITHIC, I think it's a name, I'm sorry. The THIC, which is mostly covering kind of like political aspects, like the last story was about the healthcare and how immigration was related to healthcare and stereotypes. And then you have America by Numbers. All these stories are obviously important because they are about diversity. How do you make sure that they don't overlap, or how do they make sure that each of them, each topic is relevant, and that, for example, newsrooms get interest in it?
Well, that's the beauty of what we do, right, is that we have a team of solid journalists that are producing Latino USA. And by the way, the majority of the audience for Latino USA on terrestrial radio is not Latino. We have the largest Latino listenership to a public radio program, for sure, and the second largest African-American listenership to an NPR program. But the majority of our audience actually is white. And the podcast version of Latino USA, we skew much younger and much more diverse. And And so Latino USA has kind of like a body of work and a style that we've developed over many, many, many years. Sometimes there is an overlap between Latino USA and what we're doing on In the Thick. And so In the Thick, again, it's like our own political show. It's like our Sunday political talk show, but it's just us, and we're doing it in the form that we want to do it. And that is a strictly political program. We are only doing politics. Latino USA, next week, we're doing the Tucson Rodeo. And you're like, what? Well, the Tucson Rodeo official title that's been going on for 100 years is La Fiesta de los Vaqueros. Who knew? Like, that's the official title. Like, if you go talk to the people who are, they're like, what do you hear at the Tucson Rodeo? No, we call it La Fiesta de los Vaqueros. It's adorable. So, you know, so we're not doing politics all the time, and there will be no overlapping between, you know, an hour on the Tucson Rodeo and what we're doing on In the Thick. America by the Numbers is visual. It's television. It's all related to data and demographics, and there is a lot of overlap there. So, you know, that's what I can tell you is that the Futuro Media Group, which is a nonprofit, I created it in actually 7 years ago, right about this time, because I wanted to enter into this space of reporting about diversity and demographic change and new voices. And when I did it 7 years ago, I still think that there were people who were kind of like, what? You know, like, Of course, I had just seen the 2010 census, and I saw that number of Latino demographic growth, 43%, and I was like, that number is key. So now, you know, our numbers are great. The interesting thing, for those of you who are thinking about journalism and business and how we do this, and I know that one of your professors, that's, you know, one of her fortes, is that it is really a challenge. You know, so 1 penny of every philanthropic dollar, only 1 penny goes to a Latino-run nonprofit, and it's been that way for decades. 3 pennies of every philanthropic dollar goes to nonprofit independent news. So we have our work cut out for us. And many people have said to me, Maria, why didn't you make it a commercial company and make money? And it's because actually my main motivation in life was never to make money. I know, I'm like, I wish. But that's just not what motivates me. So, so that I think has in part why we do what we do. It's motivated by the love of the work that then ends up leading to really great numbers. And that's why I've told many of you tonight and today is to find that passion. What is it that you love about the work that we do? Hold on to that passion. I've been passionate about the issue of diversity and diverse voices in the news media for the entirety of my career because I was that. I was the first Latina hired at NPR. So, like, my whole life has been about that. And I love that because I think it's not just about me, it's about the fact that I've been trying to talk about what the future of our country looks like. So find your passion and don't give it up.
So in the issues you care about, who's doing great journalism? And forget about the Times or the Post or NPR. Who out there is doing great journalism?
You know what, I'm kind of like, I have to go back and think of like who I was retweeting in the last 24 hours. I mean, I find what I'm doing a lot of is I'm doing a lot of podcasting. One of my favorite podcasts right now is actually On the Media. No surprise, as a news junkie. I mean, I've known Brooke for 25 years, but I love what they're doing right now. That's kind of hard news interpretation of our world of journalism. But I also listen a lot to On Being, which is all about kind of spirituality and has nothing to do with kind of the hardcore world of politics. So In terms of television, I find myself not being very satisfied. So I've just doing a lot of flipping, right, between the networks, between the cable channels. It's a challenge because actually my husband really does not like to watch Fox News. He gets very angry, but for me, it's very important that I'm watching Fox News. Not to say that they're doing great work in this field.
What about magazines?
You know, I'm still that kind of traditional. I'm doing the New Yorker, I'm doing the Atlantic, I'm doing Harper's. You know, I'm doing Time, I'm doing, that's kind of like my typical, I do a lot of Vanity Fair because I'm on the plane a lot. I do a lot of bad, trashy magazines sometimes, so I'm not going to refer to them. I find myself being a little bit more traditional in that kind of news consumption, and that's why I depend on my millennial staff to turn me on to things that I might not be listening to. So again, not in the world of covering people of color at all, mm-hmm. but in the world of something that I needed to listen to was, you know, Missing Richard Simmons. Why? Because it was beautifully produced. And actually it really did deal with some issues of diversity in ways that were interesting. So I'm looking for authenticity. I'm looking for, I mean, I would say that that's my main thing right now is authenticity.
So what 3 online sites would you urge this audience to go to?
So the one that I do, hold on a second, they just did the conference Facing Race. It's Colored Lines, so I do a lot of Colored Lines. I do a lot of Latino Rebels. Maybe The Root, I would say. But my media consumption is, I'm all over the place. That's why it's like I'm checking things on multiple occasions, and I don't just consume one thing. So that's why what I urge you to do is to kind of, you know, expand your vision and try to consume what you may not necessarily be consuming.
Hi Maria, my name is Victoria Rodriguez. I'm a junior magazine student, and I think being in a room where no one looks like you can be really scary and intimidating. So I was wondering, what is your advice for journalists of color who find themselves in predominantly white rooms and they're trying to fight and bring attention to underrepresented stories?
What is the role, or what do you do?
Like, what advice would you give when they find themselves in those situations?
Well, there's a famous, wonderful little saying that I just brought back from the Tucson Rodeo, La Fiesta de los Vaqueros. Cowboy up. I love this. He was like, you know, what we do here is, and actually it's the second, in 100 years of La Fiesta de los Vaqueros, it's only the second Latino that's ever run La Fiesta de los Vaqueros. And he was the one, Jose Calderon, we were talking about this. He was like, you know what, out here, you just learn to cowboy up. So I know my students were like, what are you talking about, Professor, cowboy up? You know, you're like an urban Harlem, New York City girl. Yeah, so what I mean is that pull back your shoulders, stand up straight, and be yourself. There are all kinds of market reasons for why these people in those rooms should be interested in you. And somewhere in that room is going to be someone who is interested in speaking with you. By the way, I'm in those rooms often, and I also get overlooked. You know, it still happens.
That happens when you're 5 foot.
It happens when I'm 5 feet. You know, so it happens. It's not fun, you know. I'm still oftentimes the only one. But like, as I guess Angelica said from my TED Talk, it's just like I force myself to raise my hand in that situation and ask my question. Isabel, ¿dónde está? Isabel was just saying that that's the same thing that she does, one of your students here in the master's program. It's like you just force yourself. So eat your fear. There's nothing to be afraid of. You know, I do believe in humility and respect. I really believe that those are important traits. And I also think that, as we've been talking a little bit with some of the students, you know, let's just say it is a room with like a lot of white guys, okay? They may feel actually uncomfortable and not know how to approach you. So maybe they don't, right? Because they're uncomfortable and because they actually are looking at you like, what's your name? Victoria. Victoria. They're like, híjole. They're not saying híjole, but they're like, Victoria. Victoria is the future, and I don't really understand this. You know, I don't really. So you don't know, you know. And by the way, there are probably people who have said that I've carried a chip on my shoulder and that I had a chip and that I've had chips, you know, and I probably did, and maybe, you know. So it's a process. But own your power, mamita. Own your power. I mean, you as a Latina in the United States of America are the most powerful and sought after consumer from every consumer brand in the country. Now, you know, when I was your age, I was a rebel, so I would have been like, well, I don't care. Who cares about capitalism? I don't, you know, I mean, that might have been my response. But there is a recognition there. So own it. And find whatever voice you have inside of you that is going to convince you that you are supposed to be there and that you're supposed to be talking to them with authenticity and respect and humility and openness. And sometimes you may have to actually school them on something, but you can also do that with love.
Isabel, you got something to say?
Yeah. Maria, where do you see the future of the Latinos in the media going, especially with the situation we are right now? What do you see as our near future and maybe in 5 years of the Latinos in the media?
I mean, I don't know. It's actually very interesting because, you know, Univision, Jorge and Maria Elena, you know, my dear friends, their numbers are pretty phenomenal, but there's also something that's happening, which is that the Spanish-speaking audience is in flux too. It's not necessarily a huge growing. There's, you know, as I said, the children of immigrants, 90% of them are born in the United States. Their first language is English. So even in terms of what's happening with the competition between Univision and Telemundo, very, very interesting in terms of Telemundo kind of really creeping up in the ratings game. So both things are happening. I mean, I know that we are, you know, like Fox News Latino just closed down their site. We know that other sites have been closed, and so you're seeing a contraction in terms of Latino news in certain cases, but you're also seeing, like in our case, total growth and opportunity. So I don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years from now, because as far as I'm concerned, Isabel, you know, you may graduate and in a year you may come up with a brilliant idea that you somehow are able to connect with somebody that is able to, let's say, get it on a platform, and before you know it, in 3 years, you've suddenly monetized your idea and you're the one who's kind of like now a player. You know, it could absolutely happen. So I don't know. I just know what I'm feeling is that right now there is a sense of real interest for what we're doing. Again, I think it comes from the fact that it's high quality and it's very credible and it's very authentic. But it's, again, it's, you know, if we looked at Impremedia and what's happening with Impremedia, which owns La Opinión and El Diario La Prensa, you know, I have some concerns there about whether or not they're actually doing the best that they can be in terms of being Spanish language journalists, newspaper journalists right now and what we need. So are they going to survive? I don't know. But, you know, Spanish language podcasting hasn't even begun to take off. So that's why I'm like, I you know, I don't know. You know, I suddenly thought, you know, what could the president do that could hurt someplace like Univision? You know, what would that look like? I don't know. Is it possible? I think anything is possible, sadly. But growth, I think, is like the big word. Growth.
Yeah. Hi, Maria. For those of us who are about to graduate and maybe struggling in, like, I'm from Puerto Rico, I'm planning on going back home and work there for a while. But also I think, like, should I stay and do some news in English or would staying in Spanish, like, what to do? Like, if I start in Spanish, would that actually ban me for eventually jumping into English, or?
We don't like to
That
use the word
shouldn't be-
ban. No banning, no.
Okay, well, harder to get into.
I understand your concern. You know, I did not have like a strategic plan in terms of my career. I will tell you that in the first 5 years of my career, I jumped around because I was hungry, you know, and I was looking for the next big thing. So I pushed forward. And I did some radio and I did some television, and I left NPR, and people thought I was insane for leaving NPR after being the first Latina hired there. So I urge you to, and I guess you guys know as millennials, you're not from the old school path that you're just going to go get a job at CBS News and stay there for 25 years, right? So try to be a little bit fearless in this. I mean, Puerto Rico right now, huge story. Huge issue that it's never covered on the mainland. How can you help do that? You know, does that mean that maybe you're in one of the English language newsrooms here and that you're pushing for that story so that we have an understanding of what it really means? By the way, the people of Guam, another US territory, this is what they said to me. They said, "Oh my God, we just wish we were Puerto Rico." I mean, like over every day. And I'd be like, why? And they'd say, because then at least the mainland would know where we are. Oh, so heartbreaking. I love Guam. It's just like the, you know, highest rate of service in all aspects of the U.S. military from Guam and the other Pacific Islands. Highest rate of death and injury, by the way. So if the job comes in Spanish, take it. And then come back and do something in English. Do not feel hampered. And just try to be as open as possible. It's going to work out. Like I'm telling you guys, you will, I don't know, I guess I shouldn't be saying this.
No,
I feel like you will find work.
They will.
I really do feel like you will find work. It may not be immediately. By the way, I waited tables. And I waited tables at night, and I was a freelance journalist during the day. Not ashamed to say. So, and I'll go back to waiting tables one day if I need to.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the money in the pocket was fun, but yeah, you're right, probably no. So don't be afraid. And use the bilingual element as one of your tools in your toolkit.
Hi, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Hey, right, yes. My name is John C. Baldwin. I'm a graduate student, television, radio, and film. I am a minority in a sense, not, well, for obvious reasons, but I want to go the talent agency route. And I did want to get your advice on, one thing you touched on was the management track, which I am interested in. However, the barriers of entry, you know, a lot of these companies speak of diversity, they put you in these entry-level positions. However, how do you grow knowing, you know, what your end goal, what it wants to be? How do we, you know, excel, you know, trying to get to that next level? Because I find that a lot of companies will say, oh, okay, we have diversity, we have you in this entry-level position, check, and then you're left standing there.
Yeah. So let me just tell you, because you use that word, so in my newsroom, actually, there are two words that we don't use.
Okay.
We don't use the term minority, and we don't use the term illegal to define a human being. We don't use the term minority because actually I realized that I never used that term to define myself or my children. And when we look at the demographics, I'm very interested in changing the conversation around majority, minority, Because if Anglo-America is eventually going to become a numerical minority, what does that mean? And what if we change, what if we walk away from these, you know, these terms, minority, majority, and change what they actually mean? So we don't use that term. And of course, we don't use the term illegal.
Person of color.
Yeah, person of color, African-American groups, whatever we use, but we just don't use minority. So do not give up. I mean, the talent agency route, there is so much potential there. So what do I tell you in terms of sticking it out? And
Like, if you know your end goal, like you were saying, focusing, and you want to do, you were stressing getting in the management track, becoming managers of some sort. How do we, you know, if we know we know that's what our end goal is, how to excel and, you know, grow from there and make it the you know, kind of the end game and stay committed in doing so?
Well, you just said it. You just stay committed. I mean, if you're going to try to do that, I mean, unless, look, there is this notion of actually having to go into a particular place and pay your dues, right?
Absolutely.
And I totally hear what you're saying in the sense of, well, we've got the diversity box checked off. You're going to encounter that. It's going to happen. But you can't let it get you down, right? Especially when you have such a clear vision of what you want to do. So to me, you're kind of ahead of the game. The fact that you already understand and you have a vision means that you have a clarity, and that may make it a little harder because you already know where you want to go. And that may make it more difficult to play in the corporate sandbox of having to pay your dues and move up the corporate ladder. So, you know, it kind of, you know, what's your patience? You know, will your patience be that I can do this for 5 years because I can see that there's a way to move up the corporate ladder? Or I've learned what I need to learn, and I'm going to strike out on my own and try to create this on my own. I mean, there's the entrepreneurial spirit that we have is one that we can bring into the work that we do as journalists and media creators. And I'm proof of that. It was incredibly risky. I had never run anything. I had never created an organization. So it can be done. And I love the fact that you kind of already have a plan. So like I said, you're already winning and ahead of the game.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Abby. I'm a broadcast and digital journalism major. So I have a question that is worrying a lot of us journalism students today, and that is the constant tug of war between quality journalism and money making. So what I'm noticing today and currently is that people are always demanding, of course, quality journalism, but at the same time, not willing to pay even a penny for it. People are always trying to get free articles, free videos off the internet. So my question is, what is your comment on that? And will the United States ever strike a balance between journalism and actually paying the dues for journalists who are now getting only paid $20,000 a year out of college?
Yeah, I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer because we're trying to figure it out ourselves, right? I mean, I have, again, a small nonprofit. And our foundations are always looking at us and saying, well, what are you going to do to create revenue? How are you going to generate revenue? So I would be, if I told you, well, I know exactly what to do, I would have done it already and that would have been solved for my company. So I don't have the answer to that. I mean, I don't think that any of us have the answer. What I do feel like is that there is a lot of conversation about trying to figure this out. And there are successful models. You know, I mean, again, very traditional, but if we go back to what's happening at the New York Times or the Washington Post, the fact that their numbers, their subscription numbers are going out the, you know, up the roof, and even with us. But it is not, it's not an easy problem to solve. I'm telling you, I was on a conference call at 9 a.m. for an hour and a half today, talking about that within my own nonprofit and how we're going to unlock this. So it would be great if there was like a base minimum and everybody had to pay something to consume the news media, that every time you consumed an article, a penny, you know, would go into the coffers of the people who produced it, and that everybody was paying for, like, that would be amazing. maybe you can create the app that makes that happen.
Hi. So, give you a little context. I'm actually an immigrant to this country of about 3.5 years, but in saying that I'm an immigrant, I'm a straight, white, Protestant male, English as a first language immigrant, and I think I've wondered for a long time what I do in terms of the groups I represent. How do we do better to represent other groups? Because essentially I represent the system. You know, in the 60s phrase, I'd be the man, you know, the system, the patriarchy, whatever way you want to define that. It's, you know, I'm part of an establishment. How do the groups that I represent do better to not only promote diversity in our stories, but in our workplace?
So where did you immigrate from?
Ireland.
Ireland! Oh.
The accent only comes out after 2 Guinnesses.
You know, I really worry when we get to a situation where, first of all, thank you for your question. I love that. It's not everybody who can stand up and say, you know, what can I do? And so I appreciate that. And I would say that's like the first step. What's your name? Steve. I'm already like, Steve, let's get together and talk. I want to know more. I'm interested. So I think that, you know, get-go is like being honest, right, about who you are. I mean, I shudder when I'm around people who are immediately like closing you off because of the fact that, oh, that's a white guy, and therefore I have nothing to do with that person. That's just not how I operate. So, you know, in my class recently, I had one white male student out of, you know, 99% first-gen Latino students. And in that sense, you know, he was the minority, if you will. And so my instinct at that point is to make sure that he is being heard and listened to. And he actually, it was a class about the immigration detention industrial complex and the prison industrial complex. Latinos and Latinas are one of the fastest growing groups behind bars, all kinds of bars, not just prison and jail, but also immigration. And so my white student from North Carolina, gay, male, said, you know, all of the other students in the class have some kind of relationship, whether it's to, you know, immigration detention or whether it's to people incarcerated. And he said, and I feel like as a white male, I haven't really experienced anything and I shouldn't be, so I'm not sure, I don't want to make assumptions. And he was very aware of kind of not wanting to come off as something that he isn't. And then he said, but there is one way in which I have a similarity. In that case, we were studying our investigative documentary, our 2-hour-long investigation into the death of Jose de Jesus, who died at an immigration detention center in Eloy, Arizona. He died after being there for 3 days. He killed himself by swallowing his sock. And when my producer told me that that's what the medical examiner had officially come back with, that he had swallowed his sock, I said, well, we are definitely doing this story because there is no way that anybody ever killed themselves by swallowing their sock. Well, he did. We actually FOIA'd and we got the video, and so yes, Jose de Jesus did kill himself by swallowing his sock. And my white student said, that was the documentary we were studying, he said, you know, something did happen to me when I was 18 years old, and my mom put me into the mental institution when I was suicidal as a senior in high school. And they put me into the psych ward. And he said, and I remember as soon as I got into the psych ward, I was looking around at everything that was there to see what I might be able to swallow to kill myself with. And I said, there's your connection right there. There's your connection right there. So You know, I just hope that you are walking around with, and obviously you are, because you approach this with such humility and interest. And that's what I would say to you and to your other fellow men, is to approach this with interest and humility and respect. And that's going to open all kinds of doors.
So we have time for just 2 more fairly quick questions.
Hello, Maria.
Where are you?
Right
There
here.
you are. Hi.
My name is Aiden Kim. I'm also from Chicago, Northwest Side. Go Cubbies. My question for you is in regards to the recent budget cuts to the National Arts and Science Funds, and how that has affected, especially because it's part of NPR, how that's affected your show, how that's affected you, and if it hasn't affected you, how you feel about that, and how like cutting creative marketplaces has affected the dialogue in America.
Right, so it's a proposed budget, so we don't know yet. You know, we were in the midst of applying for a grant from the NEH, the National Endowment for the Humanities, so I'm not sure, obviously, what the future of that grant is going to be. We actually don't get funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Futuro Media Group. We occasionally receive some grants from them, but we're not like a yearly fundee. So in a weird way, it's kind of like thank God, because we're not dependent. You should know that the places that will be most impacted by the cut, let's say, of the CPB, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, will actually be small, rural public radio stations. You know, the NPRs and the PBSs of the world, yeah, they're going to lose major funding. It's going to be a huge blow, but I don't believe that they're going to go under because of this. But little, small, you know, public radio station or public television station in the middle of Arkansas or Utah or Nebraska or Georgia or Mississippi might suddenly disappear because they depend on the $150,000 they get every year from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. I mean, I would just say, you know, the United States of America, a country that has absolutely no government funding in the arts and culture, if that's who we want to be, then I guess that's who we're going to be. Let's just go there. And I guess we're going there. And frankly, that's when we'll see what happens. Will people say, wait a second, this is, wait, this is not what we wanted? And I don't know. So it's really going to be up to you and the stories that you tell and the stories that you cover to see what the outcome is going to be. I mean, is this what we wanted? We shall see.
All right, Adonis, I'll give you the last question.
Thank you. Maria, I work in Washington, D.C., been there for 36 years. I've been listening to you for years, and this is the first time I've had a chance to see you. It's a real pleasure. I'm visiting Syracuse for the next couple of days. So my question is with respect to the numbers. You talk about the numbers a lot, and particularly the numbers with respect to Latinos in the United States. You know, the world changed on November 8th, for better or worse, depending on your perspective. What lessons can we take away, particularly for the Latino community, can we take away from the election of 2016, where I think the projections were that Latinos would turn out in large numbers, other groups would turn out in large numbers, and perhaps turn the tide of the election. And so we, now in retrospect, we can see that didn't happen. What lessons do you point to as perhaps beacons for the future, for future action, for different results? Thank you.
Yeah, and by the way, I was, even though I did get the Donald Trump nomination part right, you know, what I got wrong was that I was one of those people saying that, you know, the Puerto Ricans of Central Florida are the most powerful Puerto Ricans in the entire world because they can shift the state of Florida, and if you move Florida, that's it. And then I was watching Florida, and it didn't happen. So, and I think that, you know, in terms of, we do on In the Thick, we have a mea culpa moment where it's like you can say what you got wrong. I think I misjudged the percentage of Puerto Rican voters that might go for Donald Trump and Latinos in general in Florida that might go for Donald Trump. On the other hand, I think that, our numbers were solid. In fact, Latinos did have strong turnout numbers. There's a lot of dispute about the numbers in general, what actually happened with those numbers. Of course, we're very intrigued by anywhere from 18 to 25% of Latino voters who believe that Donald Trump represents them, right? So I'm incredibly interested in them and who they are, and were we not understanding that part of the Latina voters. I think one of the things that I worry about deeply, and that's why we need you, all of you as journalists, but those of you who are working in fields of covering diversity and reporting on diversity. What I do fear is people disconnecting, right? Of people just saying, throwing up their hands and just being like, why? Why vote? We saw that in the African American community, and of course, we actually covered that story in North Carolina. And as it's been said, the act of not voting is also a political act. But was this the outcome that they had expected or not? So I do worry about a kind of disconnect from the politic. Yeah. On the other hand, the reason why I continue doing the work that I'm doing and why I do all of this talking is because I believe we can change things, right? And so one of the observations that has come out in terms of Latinos and Latinas and the political process is that we don't talk enough domestic politics in our homes. My family was different. We were doing this from the get-go. So what I tell people, and those of you who are here, is that you should be talking politics in your homes at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Not all the time, because, by the way, my kids are like, Mom, stop! Stop with the politics, stop! So I understand that, but in order to make the conversation one that you, like the students when you're going back to your homes, and with your younger brothers and sisters, or for example, is to be having those conversations over your Fruit Loops in the morning or the oatmeal or whatever, is to be talking about that, because we have heard that that is one of the things that leads to deeper political engagement. So it is actually on all of us. And I do take this really seriously. It really is on all of us to do that on a daily. I'm doing that on a daily. Except for sometimes on very long plane trips where I know that the person sitting next to me may not be somebody who I want to engage, Other than that, I'm pretty much talking to everybody all the time about who they are and why they do what they're doing, and yes, I ask them, who are you voting for? What do you think about politics? Because that's just, so I would hope that all of us do that. And I do believe that if you approach it from a place of curiosity, which you should all have innate in you as journalists, and a bit of humility, which we don't always have innate as journalists. But if you can approach that and to be encountering the people who are most unlike you, I hope that that's what keeps us engaged.
Maria, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I'm going to give the last word to Angelica Rodriguez because she's a big reason. She said, I want Maria to come, and she did. And so, Angelica, you get the last word. We'll be back here tomorrow at 9:30 with our other guests. Hope to see a lot of you. Angelica, good work.
First of all, thank you, Maria, for taking all your time. I guess for the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, Maria is one of our role models, just because she represents many of the voices that belong to us, many of our backgrounds. We come from Puerto Rico, we come from here, the United States, Colombia, different diverse groups that you and your group have just give and represent your story with your stories, our voices. So I just wanted to say thank you because of that, and thank you all of you guys. This event is extremely important, especially right now as a young journalist, that we are in something that we don't know what to expect, and it's extremely important to get to know what it means for the media to talk about race, to talk about diversity, to talk about gender, to talk about being a Muslim, like religion, all these topics that are about identity, that people actually feel that belongs to them. So I'm extremely excited and I really hope all of you guys that are right here, each of you got something to learn and something to practice in your future. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks so much.